In a similar fashion, many people with cancer tend to share some common traits. A 1984 study compared physiological responses to stress among people with melanoma, people with heart disease, and a healthy control group. The participants were shown slides containing statements like, "You're ugly," or "You have only yourself to blame." The physiological responses were the same across all the groups. But the melanoma patients were the most likely to deny feeling upset or anxious after seeing the messages. Their responses indicated emotional repression and a desire to maintain a strong facade. Despite these curious similarities, it's important to note that no personality trait can cause ALS, cancer, or any other disease. But these traits, combined with genetic predisposition, may make someone more vulnerable to illness. Humans learn how to interact with the world early on in life. The human brain is uniquely designed. Upon exiting the mother's womb, a newborn baby possesses a brain that is small and immature. But that brain grows rapidly. In fact, about 90% of brain development occurs after birth. In the first few months alone, our brains form millions of new connections. So it's not difficult to believe that, as babies, our environment greatly shapes our understanding of the world. We inherit some amount of genetic potential, but in order for that potential to be realized, it must be nourished. Human brain development requires the nurturing emotional interactions that stimulate nerve cells and teach us how to operate in the world. The key message here is, humans learn how to interact with the world early on in life. Parent-child interactions establish children's understanding of the world. Very early on, a child learns whether she's living in a world of neglect, hostility, and indifference or one of love and acceptance. To that end, physical touch during infancy is extremely important. Being touched by our parents stimulates growth and development. But that alone isn't enough. The quality of attunement, which indicates a parent being tuned in to his child's emotional needs, is also essential. Parents who aren't attuned might try to play with a sleeping or resting child, ignoring that the child may need a break. Lack of attunement and physical touch have reverberating effects throughout a child's life. A famous psychological experiment called the strange situation illustrates this well. In the experiment, researchers spent a year observing interactions between mother-infant pairs in the home. Then the pairs were brought into a laboratory. There, infants spent 3 minutes each with just their mother, with their mother and a stranger, with just a stranger, and finally alone. The experiment's results were revealing. Infants who received attuned attention at home showed signs of missing their mothers when separated, but were easily soothed when they were reunited. They had secure attachment styles. Other babies, however, showed various insecure styles. Avoidant infants, for instance, didn't appear distressed when separated from their mothers, but showed signs of stress when reunited. In adolescence, those who had a secure attachment style as infants showed greater marks in emotional maturity, peer relationships, and academic performance as compared to their insecurely attached peers. Clearly, our first years of life dictate how we'll interact with the world as adults even if we aren't consciously aware of it. To overcome stress, embrace the power of negative thinking. When discussing the effects of emotions, stress, personality, and relationships on illness, you can easily start to feel like you're being blamed for your health conditions or like you're blaming others. However, this is far from the case. Instead, examining the root causes of your illness can help you take responsibility for yourself and your actions. The more you can learn about yourself, the less you'll be a passive victim of your illness. And the more you take control, the greater your chances of finally overcoming that illness. This is the key message: to overcome stress, embrace the power of negative thinking. When the author was involved in palliative care, he came across many patients who couldn't understand why they'd developed cancer. One man expressed that he'd always been a positive thinker who'd never given in to pessimistic thoughts. So why should he have gotten cancer? Well, it's not quite that simple. While positive emotions do increase well-being, constant positive thinking can actually become a destructive coping mechanism. By ignoring the bad, you repress your negative emotions, increase your stress levels, and ultimately predispose yourself to disease. Instead, it's better to engage in some negative thinking. That doesn't mean living as if the glass were half empty. Instead, it involves accepting and embracing all of reality, even the bad parts. Then, you can determine a way to fix things. The power of negative thinking is borne out by research. A study done in San Francisco found that emotional repression in melanoma patients was positively correlated with relapse and death. By contrast, another study found that melanoma patients who felt less accepting and resigned to their illness and had a harder time coping with their diagnosis were actually less likely to suffer relapses. So it shouldn't be surprising that psychological support can make a big difference in cancer recovery. A study conducted at UCLA looked at 34 people with stage 1 melanoma, half made up a control group, and half went to 6 group therapy sessions over a 6-week period. 6 years later, 10 members of the control group had died, and 3 had recurrences. By contrast, just 3 of the therapy group had died, while 4 had recurrences. When people become ill, many react with denial or minimization. But this isn't what our bodies need. Instead, we must grow to understand the root causes of our stress and, ultimately, ourselves. Health is a delicate balancing act, and chronic stress can easily disrupt that balance by damaging our immune and nervous systems. In the worst cases, chronic stress can contribute to the onset and exacerbation of illnesses like MS, cancer, and ALS. It's only by reckoning with our unhealthy coping mechanisms, destructive personality traits, and repressed emotions that we can fight stress and reclaim our health. Actionable advice: learn how to express your anger better. There's a strange paradox when it comes to anger. Repressing it can cause physiological problems, but so can expressing it through screaming, shouting, and hitting things. In fact, these classic, childlike ways of acting out are ways of avoiding the actual experience of rage. The key is instead to allow yourself to feel anger but not lash out in response. Instead, sit calmly and let the rage burn through you.